Speaking for the trees, no matter where they're from. The podcast.
When most people hear about green energy projects, they consider this to be a positive thing, to be an environmentally positive thing. But what's really missing from the conversation most of the time are all the various environmental effects of these different kinds of projects. So I was hoping if you could speak to that just a little bit. It's sort of the a big picture, a more general perspective on what kinds of environmental problems are caused by wind, solar, lithium mining, etc.
Well, okay. I mean, I'll start with solar, and I know that some folks they think that we have to do this right now because we need to stop fossil fuel emissions from happening, and I don't disagree with stopping fossil fuel emissions, but I think many of the impacts that I'm about to talk about are getting either overlooked or justified by what they would call like a green energy transition. And so, starting with solar energy, it's low density energy, meaning that you need quite a lot of space in order to produce the same output that a fossil fuel plant or even a nuclear plant could actually produce. You would just need a lot of space to do so. And so that means we just have to put those panels just about everywhere. We're a little luckier here in the US than, say, some of those ecosystems. And, well, if you've seen photos of China, they've actually covered whole mountains with solar panels. It's almost shocking to see that. But the point being that wherever they put this, it needs a lot of space. And so they also want to have good solar insolation. That's where there's a lot of, radiant solar energy coming down. And so they like the desert. They want relatively flat areas, although some of them do want to build on sloping areas as well that are south facing, and they want to be near transmission infrastructure. And so, where all of the special areas and ecosystems are located, I mean, they didn't necessarily choose to be next to transmission areas either. But we're dealing with situations where the solar projects need to either scrape up or drive over thousands of acres of habitat. That's how we see it. They see it as open land. We see it more as habitat. Up in the Great Basin, for example, I mean, we want to talk about that area. The basin and range area is characterized by a mountain range, and then 40 to 60 to 80 miles, there's another mountain range, but those basins are flat in the bottom. And once we can get some transmission built out there, at least that's how the companies are looking at it, we can fill a lot of those basins with solar panels. And so we have a lot of proposals in the area for really big transmission lines that are going to connect these solar panels up in the Great Basin. And they're going to have to build it among those sagebrush ecosystems. And there's a lot of applications now. I would say roughly about maybe 75,000 to 85,000 acres of solar applications in the Nevada Great Basin alone. And they're big. Some of them are like, we're looking at 10,000 acre, 15,000 acre proposals, and one of them was even like 25,000 acres. And so these guys just try to claim all of the land out there. But what they're going to need to do is they're going to have to remove a lot of that sagebrush. And that, of course, is habitat for sage grouse, pygmy rabbit, and a host of other species that actually use that habitat. And it's a tragedy to think that if they finally do build this power line called Green Lake North from the Reno area to the Robinson substation outside of Ely, that many thousand acres of that habitat could be developed for solar. Solar has a lot of impacts. They need to scrape the ground, and in the Mojave Desert here, we have a thin, sometimes thicker surface called desert pavement, which is essentially a flat layer of stones or rocks that's been cleaned out by years and years of wind, erosion, and settlement. And desert pavement is really important for holding soils together, even holds moisture in the ground, and some of the desert plants really benefit off of it. Well, a lot of that will get scraped up, and that area below it that can get run over so many times, it becomes a fine dust, and it just becomes airborne. And some of the dust is caliche. It's carbon-based lime, just broken down limestone. And caliche in a fine enough dust, when it becomes airborne, becomes a greenhouse gas. And so we have that element. Another really big element of these solar projects is that when they build them and they do all of that scraping and that driving and running over of habitat, they need water to mitigate the dust. And so we have a cluster of solar projects down in the Mojave Desert here, south of Pahrump, Nevada. And there's roughly 29,000 to 30,000 acres of either developed projects or proposals that collectively would need about 5,000 acre feet of water in order to construct them. And so they're proposing wells near the solar projects, but those would also be near spring areas or underground or groundwater areas that have groundwater close to the surface that support a lot of mesquite and other phreatophyte plants. And so there's quite a bit of pressure to develop a lot of that. There's also birds. This is a problem with wind turbines as well. We're not following as many wind proposals here in Nevada, but the one project that we do have so far has managed to kill 8 golden eagles since its operation, and a number of other birds and raptors, including saw-whet owls. But the turbines tips will move at approximately 180 miles per hour, and the birds don't see those, and they do create a problem. In solar energy, we have the power towers that were built. Those are the big thermal plants that are radiated by mirrors, but they create a solar flux that actually burn birds in midair. Unfortunately, there are no proposals to build any more of those that I know of, just because they're really expensive and pretty inefficient. And they're pretty even recognized as pretty bad for the environment. But birds can also see solar panels as a lake-like entity as they're looking on the ground. And the lake effect is theorized to draw some birds to some of these large sprawling photovoltaic projects. And they do find a lot of birds in some of these projects in Southern California, a lot of birds that have collided with solar panels. So there is a pretty big town of dead birds. The solar industry says there's really not enough evidence to prove all of that. But we talked to some biologists that tell us they find buckets of dead birds from some of these projects. There's also the people factor. A lot of them need to be built next to small communities, and we work with a lot of them, and it is kind of heartbreaking. I mean, we have some projects that want to build, like less than a quarter mile, just a few hundred feet from people's homes, and it just becomes a really big deal, and they get worried about the water too. They get worried about their local habitat, and it surprises me how many people in these little towns come out in defense of the desert ecosystem. You may have heard of the project outside of Boron, California, that they're chainsawing down about 4,200 Joshua trees That's another huge impact. It's like a removal of the native plant. So we have a number of impacts I could keep talking about, but I think I'll leave it at that for now.